Good evening. Welcome to Neighborhood News. Another edition, Carlos?
Yes, it's Tuesday night and we're back again for one more show of Neighborhood News. For the past 2 weeks, I have to say, we've been having nice guests on.
Yep.
And today, we have a very nice guest, and we're going to have some questions, some good questions for him. And believe me, we're going to have some good answers too. Before we do that, let me just announce that the Flint Senior Center are showing some movies on Fridays at 10 o'clock and 1:30. And the dates are April the 10th, the 17th, and the 24th. So if you have a little bit of time, go and watch a movie there. It's free. You just have to show up. So. The other thing that I told you, and it's been 3 weeks that I've been saying that we're gonna talk about this. I keep bringing this because I'm very interested on the 70-page city finance released from the 6th floor. And the only thing I have to say, if you want to see black and white and where's the fat is, believe me, it's not here. And I know a little bit about numbers. I'm not as smart as my dad, which is an accountant, and my brother is an accountant. Now my young sister, with 27, she's an accountant. I'm not an accountant because I hate numbers. But I have to say that I have to make a couple of calls to kind of understand some of these pages because they are confused. And believe me, it's not what we asked for. It's not what I was expecting. I was expecting black and white, street talk, not lawyer numbers, not something I have to look on a map to get answers. And that's definitely, it's not here. I didn't saw a city council yet. We didn't have a city council yet after the release of this 70-page. But I have to say, if a city council comes out and says, he delivered what we asked for, that's exactly what he asked for, I want to sit down with that city council here on TV. I want to open this, and I want him to explain to me the questions I have, if you understood what's in here. So I don't want to hear that. They asked for, so they're gonna have to say, I'm sorry, this is not what we asked for. And me as a regular person, this is not what I want to see. We've been asking, do we need to cut fat? I want to see that fat. Here, then show me what is the fat. I still don't know how much we spend in gas on the city, how many vehicles the city has, how many assistants of assistants or the assistants of assistants we hide in Fall River, that we need people to work with the shovels on their hands instead of having open a hole with one guy with a shovel and 5 assistants looking around, see them working. And 5 o'clock now, all those assistants go home and the employers come in as a double time, okay, to finish the job. So that's what I'm looking for. That's what the citizens of the city asked for. So this was not delivered on the 70-page, and I really want to see what the city council has to say about this.
I mean, there were more could have been in there, but I think it was pretty decent on the whole. I mean, I think there's a lot of things people don't realize. We hear the thing about the overdue taxes, but when you actually see what some people owe, which means they haven't paid this in probably 5 to 10 years, something has to be done in that instance. If you haven't paid your taxes in 10 or 11 years, the chances are you're not going to pay it in the next 5.
Exactly.
So I think things like that we need to get more aggressive
to
with.
Collect.
You know.
We definitely need to collect some money that's here. That doesn't make sense. A person that owns property all over the city, owns over $500,000 in tax. That makes no sense to me. If you pick up a paper, a Herald News from January of 2012, I'm on the front page complaining to the mayor, okay, about a property that was abandoned on Pleasant Street. And right there, if you open the page, you're going to see my comments inside with, she's been getting away with this for 10 years. This was back in 2012. Today, they can print that paper. That's exactly what's going on. And she still owns money to the city, even more than she was owed back then, because she never paid those taxes. So, where are we standing? Are we going
I don't know. Now I feel bad for Jasiel's here, because you're like, I want somebody to explain this.
No, I don't want nobody to explain to me until they actually said, we got what we asked the mayor.
Right.
He delivered to us. That's the list. That's the person that I want to sit down, and I want him to answer, or her, answer my questions about this 70-page. If that person comes and says that person is lying to the citizens of the city.
Before you're getting on a tirade here, so I'm going to calm you down a little bit. Before we get on that, this all has to do with economic development. And Jasiel's a young kid.
Definitely.
To me, he's a kid, but I mean a young adult, I should say. So other communities that have changed up in Boston, Jamaica Plain was a terrible area. It's changed over. Somerville at one time was not the greatest.
Those were Providence.
Yeah, Providence.
Tucket.
So as far as that, I think people need to, as you get older, I mean, you have your own house, that sort of thing, but I think you kind of lose what is, I don't know if it's trendy or how, what young adults are looking for. And attracting them. Look how they've turned these other, cities, neighborhoods sort of thing around. You as a young adult, I know some of the things, Starbucks, if we get a Starbucks here, my daughter would be jumping up and down. So I know it's stuff like that.
Yeah, I want to thank you first for having me on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to both of you and, of course, the public. And I will talk about economic development because I truly believe that's where I gravitate towards most. I think it's where my skill set, my background outside of politics really lends some credibility and some ability to actually have a positive impact. And you have every councillor is going to gravitate, or any elected official is going to gravitate towards things that they know. And this is an area that I'm very familiar with. So as someone who's always been from Fall River, grew up here, I did have an opportunity to leave, go to Providence College, so not too far. Was able to keep a close eye on my city at the time of being at Providence College. But what I noticed even at my time there is you have a lot of people in my age group. You're talking 18, 25, and then there's an extension of that, 25 to 35, that are true economic drivers. And what I mean by that is they are the people that are going to the local shops. They're the ones going to the local coffee shops, even more so than the Starbucks. Many college-age students and even after college graduates, they want to try those local places. They want to go to the local taco places, the local Portuguese food places that they've probably never even heard of, and tried. So they are huge economic drivers. And that's something the city has not done a good enough job attracting over the last several years. The city has also changed over many, many generations. You had a community that was primarily working class in terms of blue collar, right? And that, unfortunately, is not even in this region anymore to a certain extent. Manufacturing is not the top employer. Not even in our own city is it the top employer anymore. Now you're talking about healthcare as the top employer. You're talking about government being a top employer. You're talking about the finance industry being a top employer throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In fact, I believe medical and finance are 1 and 2 in Massachusetts for top employers. So times have changed. Yeah. We have not changed with those times as a city. The reason we have not changed is there has not been a clear vision and plan that has been followed through on. A lot of promises have been broken over the last 20, 30, 40 years that have led us to where we are financially, that have led us to where we are with the demographics of our community, and have led us to a departure of many people that are my age that went to college just like I did and never returned to the city. That is one of our biggest issues. Even bigger than that issue, I believe, is our inability to attract people that are not from Fall River but are in those age groups. That is an even bigger issue because you have places that most of my friends, most people I graduated with, they're moving to suburbs of major cities because they can't afford to be in downtown Boston.
Yeah.
But they're getting a job in Boston and they're living in a suburb of Boston. This is just an example. You can take Washington, D.C., you can take any major city, Chicago, etc. But there are a lot of suburbs. And I would consider us still a suburb of a Providence or Boston. So the issue that you're seeing is these people are moving to these communities. They're not from there. Somebody moving to Somerville today that's in my age category is probably not from Somerville. But they're moving there. They're renting an apartment. They're working in Boston. But they're coming home. They're going to local restaurants. They're going to local bookstores. They're going to all those local places and feeding money that they're making in Boston into the local economy. That is not being done here at all.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Now, the way we attract them is very simple. You have to have the amenities that people want. That's with anything.
Yep.
So if you want to have a certain lifestyle, a certain prestige in your community, or a certain quality of life. If you want to have a certain quality of life, you have to provide, or at least have the plan to provide, the correct amenities to support that. It's like an example we were talking about right before we started, right? There are different types of hotels that you can stay at.
Yeah.
Those different types, the reason they're more expensive, you know, if you go to a 5-star hotel, 4-star versus a 1-star, is the amenities they provide.
Yeah.
Fall River, right now, is not providing the amenities of a 3, 4, or 5-star hotel. And that's why you're not attracting the right clientele, the right people that are going to spend money in the local community. I'll give you an example. I go around the community, obviously, a lot. I see a lot of 3-tenement homes. I grew up in a 3-tenement home on William Street off of Columbia. That's where I grew up.
Yep.
It's my grandmother's 3-tenement home. My family lived on the 3rd floor. So I know what that's like. You have a lot of people that own 3-tenement homes. My grandmother still owns her 3-tenement home. So you have a lot of 3-tenement homes. And people always tell me in the community, there are so many apartments. Do a Google search, you'll see tons of apartments for rent. There is such a thing as too much supply and not enough demand for those types of apartments. And that's what we're experiencing. Millennials, people in my age group, 18 to 35, are not looking for 3rd-floor apartments with no dishwasher, et cetera. They're not looking for that because they don't. There are so many options today. They don't have to go there. They're willing to spend double, and in some cases triple the price of a Fall River 3-tenement home to get the amenities that they want. That is the issue. So how do we change that? Well, I think you have to slowly introduce the right type of housing. Just like if you're selling a product. If you're selling the wrong product, you have to adapt. If you notice that, if you're a coffee shop and you notice that a bunch of people all of a sudden want, iced coffee, and you don't offer iced coffee in the summer, you're not going to make a lot of sales. The same thing here.
Yeah.
If we don't offer the correct housing, you're not going to get the type of people you want to come into Fall River.
Yeah.
Now, we have a huge opportunity with our mills. Mill loft-style apartments is the #1 type of apartment style right now in this country. Mills are being converted in South Boston. They're building buildings to look like mills that are brand new buildings with big windows, tall ceilings, etc. We have 66 mills in Fall River. This is a 2-part economic plan, very simple. #1, you entice developers to come to Fall River. That's a whole separate issue. I believe we have to start reaching outside of Fall River to bring developers here. You have to introduce new fish into the pond. Because right now, there's few fish developing Fall River.
Yeah.
Why not bring more fish into the pond? You entice developers to come in. For example, if I was in charge of economic development, or if I was the mayor, I would have basically a convention of some sort and invite as many developers as I possibly could and say, we are going to work with you with incentives. We're going to work with you with the proper TIFs. We're going to work with you with ways to make sure that your property can be developed and be successful. And then if you can get 2 or 3 mills a year to be converted to apartments, you're talking, 100, 150 apartments each. There's 2 reasons this would be a huge economic development piece to Fall River's future. #1 is you're going to get 150 market rate apartments, market rate payers to come into these beautiful mills. And now they're going to be spending dollars in Fall River and living here, the millennials primarily.
Yeah.
Second piece, which is even more important, you're going to take that mill that's sitting there, maybe abandoned, maybe half, 50% occupied, whatever it may be, maybe it's manufacturing and some other things. You're going to take that building from being assessed at $1.2 million to now being assessed at $10, $20, $30 million. When you do that reassessment, at the same tax rate, I'm not even talking about increasing taxes, same tax rate as today, when the project is complete, let's say, and I know this for a fact, the average mill, that's $1.2 million, is paying $30,000 to $40,000 in taxes, just property tax. If you introduce that new program, and that mill is, let's just use easy math here, it's now worth $10 million, and it's assessed at $10 million. The same property that was paying $30,000 is now paying $300,000. Do you know how many households it would take us to develop to get to $300,000 of revenue?
You're right. I mean, it has to start there. I look at the restaurant, the Mexican restaurant, La Cantina on Bank Street. That's something that you would see in Providence or Boston.
Absolutely.
I love that place. And I mean, I know there's a younger demographic that goes in there, but you do have a lot of, different age ranges. And when I go in there, I'm like, this is great. This is Fall River. I mean, we could, we need to get more of this kind of thing in here. So. But you know what, Jasiel, that part I totally understand. There's been a lot of talk about this, and I really agree that something should be done where we have 6-family homes, even 4-family homes. We have landlords that don't live in Fall River, or sometimes you have landlords that live in Fall River, but they don't live in that area. And they're just bringing folks in, and they're a burden on the school system because they're paying the same that you and I say they're paying $3,000, they're paying $3,200, a little bit more than we are. And they have kids, they're going to have at least 2 or 3 kids in the school system, one for apartment, one for each apartment, and then the trash and the police and the fire. And I think that is another way of increasing revenue. And I don't really even feel bad personally because I have a 3-family too. I don't feel bad because they are using more services also. And I know that's going to be kind of tough to tell them, but it's a business. They are operating a business.
And I don't want to repeat myself, but I know Eden probably saw the show. The way they want to, where they're going to divide the line when the property is now an investment.
Right.
And I said, and this happened to me when I was looking for a house. They sat on my kitchen table and they told me, if you not going to live on that house, that's an investment. You're not going to get a low interest loan because that's an investment for the bank. That's this single, it's your property. That's where you live. But if you buy a 3-family now and you don't live there, that is an investment problem. So why is the cities not following the same steps that the banks are following? That's what I said, that's where we're gonna divide the line. If you don't live there, that's an investment property. You're making money out of that. That's a business for you.
Sure.
You're gonna pay the tax to the city as a business on that property.
Well, that goes back to old ways, right? So if you turn the clock back 100 years, those properties were primarily owned by the mill owners who had the economic and political power in the city. So of course they don't want more taxes on themselves. So we have to really look at the history of Fall River, the history of our taxation, and update it. There's so many things in the city that just have not been updated because you haven't had someone go in and look at everything that's happening.
Is that included on the charter that we had the conversation last week?
I don't think taxation would be.
Oh, would it? Okay.
I don't think it would. No, it wouldn't. Taxation would not be.
I like your idea. I think it's great, but I think that you're bringing in, folks that have the money. But on the other hand, and I said this before, and people, maybe it might not be politically correct, but we've done such a great job at attracting folks that are low income from different areas, and you can't have a city when the low income is here and the rest of the folks are here. So I think that's a part of probably a part of a plan that will kind of slow that process down a little bit. Because then it's going to then it will raise the rents a little bit, and then they're going to be a little bit pickier on who they bring in.
You're absolutely right. It'll raise the rents, and then gentrification will happen, no doubt. It happens in any community that sees market rate rentals.
Yeah.
It happens in places where there's more demand, and it happens over time, but relatively quickly. Today, if you go to parts of Providence, you go to parts of DC, that 5 years ago, just 5 years ago,
Yeah.
were terrible. You'd never go into those areas, are now market rate apartments. They've either been knocked down, which has to happen.
Yeah.
People have to understand. I feel like a lot of times in Fall River, we don't want to embrace any kind of change at all.
Yeah, no, I
People
agree.
have to understand there will be neighborhoods that have to be gentrified over time. That means the existing buildings, the existing old housing stock will have to be updated, will have to be knocked down.
Yeah.
Now, I don't typically advocate for that if it's a historic property. I think that's something that the city really has to protect.
Yeah.
Because if you look at pictures of us 100 years ago, it's like a whole different city. Whole different city. So that's something we have to continue to protect. We're talking about places in downtown, like the Bank Street Armory,
Yeah.
like the police station. These are things that we have to make an investment in. We have to stop looking at the city spending money on our behalf as citizens on things like historic preservation as a waste of money, because it's an investment for your future, for your future property, for your future property's value. That's what the city needs to be focused on. I think that people also are very uncomfortable with the fact that the city right now is in dire straits financially. And if you just keep doing money grabs, and I don't mean that, and I don't mean pay as you throw as just a money grab, but in a way, the way it was implemented very quickly, without the proper due process, without the council's approval, was broken. There was a split between what everyone, no one was on the same page.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of issues. And in a way, it was a way to fill a budgetary gap. And I don't think any fee, any fine, any tax should be a way to fill a gap. It's obviously a way to pay for services, but it should not be a way to fill a gap. Because a gap means there was a failure in planning and there was a failure in budgeting. And that's not acceptable.
No, I agree. It's going to be. I'd like to see, to be honest with you, some of these things, like you said, some neighborhoods they could. It would turn it around if you could get rid of some of these
It would benefit
houses.
the neighborhood.
It has to. And it's very similar. The city, I always talk about the city as a business, and a lot of people do, but the city is a business, but it also is a little bit more than that. It has to care for its citizens. So you're not looking to make a profit, because then that means taxes are too high.
Yeah.
But you are looking to make investments that are going to return more. If the city is putting money in its stabilization fund from taxes, I think that's the wrong approach. It should be putting money in the stabilization fund because of investments, and I don't mean actual cash investment, but I mean true investments that it's made. So you talk about, instead of just looking at a property and saying, we're gonna sell it and knock it down, you say, what can this be that's going to return more economic development to the city than it currently is doing right now? That way we get more taxpayers instead of increased taxes. That is the key. How do we bring more tax, how do we bring a bigger tax base into Fall River? That's truly the key. And small businesses, of course, bring them in as well.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'll give you, you know, because you live near the Sam's Club.
Yeah.
I think the place is great. I mean, I'd probably be in there every day just to walk around, and it's. But that's not, people in Fall River would complain and say, we don't have anything here. I got to go to Dartmouth, I got to go to Seekonk. And what's kind of upsetting is the place is not that busy. And when I talk to people, they're like, I don't want to pay $40. And I'm like, you pay $40, you're going to save just in the gas. Mm-hmm. So when we get these things into Fall River, people have to, patronize them, and get in there and use the services. And that's probably what part of the time that we don't get things like Chipotle, Starbucks, and all that, because people are going to say it's too expensive, you know? So it goes back to what you're saying. We need to bring in.
Well, these companies, Chipotle, Starbucks, they have a target market.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most of Fall River does not fit in the target market right now. But if you start to introduce 100 apartments on the waterfront that are market rate and are being rented by millennials, if you start to build, shopping centers that are different, like for example, the Harbor Mall area, the entire South End, that Harbor Mall, the Shaw's Plaza, and then even beyond that, could be something like a Garden City in Cranston. Yeah, can be something with a movie theater. It's appalling to me as a young individual, or just as an individual in the city, that we don't have a movie theater. It's appalling to me.
If we go the waterfront in Bristol, it's a quarter of our waterfront.
And it's beautiful, gorgeous.
And you have restaurants, you have the marina, you have everything there, and that's a quarter of our waterfront.
Sure. But this is what I mean. Right now, the city is throwing money at various small projects instead of saying, this is the plan, and this is how we're going to get there. We're going to get there, and it's just like any business. You can't bond in a business if you don't have the ability to eventually pay for it, right? If you don't have a sustainable plan of how you're going to pay that bond back. So if we bond for a park, we should be saying, what is the economic impact of this park, and how is it going to generate more dollars for the city of Fall River long term? Because parks are economic development. They do generate revenue through economic development around it.
Yeah.
But we're not doing that right now. We're not looking at, okay, if we truly committed $15 million to do something with the Quequechan River, to do a water park, a waterway from downtown. There's no connection from downtown to the waterfront. There's no walkable connection. Even with the 79 redevelopment, there's still no walkable connection.
Yeah.
If we did something, what is the economic impact? How many businesses can we attract to Fall River? The other thing the city has to focus on is right now, and it's not just trendy, this has been the backbone of America, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship has come into the limelight nowadays, but it has always been the backbone of America. We can do such a better job at attracting young, I don't mean young in age, but just young companies. I know people that are 50 plus years old starting their first business, from manufacturing to consulting companies to everything. Why are they not locating here in Fall River? We've got cheap rents, we've got great housing in certain areas. I mean, you can't find the same type of homes in the historic Highlands anywhere else that I know of in the region at those prices.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
we have to do a better job marketing the city. So I know I hear a lot of my colleagues always talk about, before I was on the council, talking about hiring an economic development person. The city first and foremost needs a marketing person to really market the city's assets that we currently have, and then begin to develop new ones that we can market as well.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, look at New Bedford down the road. I've gone to a couple concerts down there, and then you go across the street to the Waterfront Grill.
It's amazing.
And I'm like, this is New Bedford. I mean,
Yeah.
I lived there when I was
Right.
younger, but I'm like, this is great. It's like almost being on vacation kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it could be that way here too. With,
Absolutely.
And then the people, they don't care as long as they rent the apartment. They don't care who they rent the apartment to. That's another problem we have. And instead of they renting an $800 apartment for half a price, for $450, what do you expect
Right.
to rent to? The value, it's $800. Keep it at $800. It's going to take you 6 months to rent, but guess what? You're going to have a good person renting that apartment. It's going to stay there for months,
Sure.
for years.
But I agree with Jasiel. That's where it does start. In all those areas in D.C., they couldn't afford to live in the direct city, so they moved to a place that was cheaper, and they turned the whole neighborhood or that part of that suburb around. So
That's the key.
So thank you,
Thank you.
Jasiel, for coming for our show today. And
Appreciate
you're always welcome.
Thank you.
Whatever you want to put on your agenda,
Sure.
our show, you're always welcome. And we see you next week for one more show.
cool. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.